Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Lead for Change webinar, presented by PCQuest and CIOL.com in association with the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, SAP, and powered by Arcadin. Thank you for standing by. We will now proceed to the Lead for Change webinar on how to create a nurturing ecosystem for creativity in your organization. For the duration of presentation, all participants' line will be in listen-only mode. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation. However, we encourage you to send us questions while the webinar is in progress in the chat panel. These will then be addressed at the end of the session. We will also be conducting quick polls during the webinar, which will be visible. So please do participate to make the conversation more useful to you. So now, without further delay, I would like to hand over the proceedings to Anil Chopra, Senior Editor, PCQuest and CIOL.com. Thank you, and over to you, sir.
Hi, welcome to the Lead for Change webinar. And as you already heard in the intro, it's about how do you actually nurture a creative ecosystem in your organization. And it's a discussion. To have this discussion, I have with me a very special guest, Antti Ohrling. He's an innovator, a strategist, and he's an entrepreneur with many successful ventures to his credit. And he's currently the country head for Rovio Entertainment. You may or may not have heard of Rovio, but I'm sure you would have heard of Angry Birds, the immensely popular game. And here we have him with us. Hi, Antti. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the kind introduction.
So we'll have a discussion for about 40 minutes, and during this time, audience can send in their questions. And after that, a 20-minute Q&A in which we will take those questions from the audience, and I will ask you those questions, and you could answer those questions. So we are here to talk about how to help people be more creative in their workplace, in their office. So let's start off by looking at the organization. How can an organization actually be more creative, have an environment for creativity in place? Can you just talk about that, and how can they benefit from it?
Okay, the creativity as a word is sometimes you could see that it's even banned in some organizations. I guess it's because it's inherently uncontrollable for us. It's easy to create processes, or easier to create processes in a company without taking into account the creativity. It is fairly challenging to have a process that actually allows that much leeway that creativity brings. I think that the organization's the first thing is to create an environment in the organization which allows creativity. I mean, creativity inherently allows mistakes. And that's not always something, a forte that companies would have, that they would encourage people to make mistakes. It's the contrary. But creativity is an experimental mode. It is something that is applied perhaps the first time. You don't always have the resolve to pack up your projects that inherently has some creativity in it, and therefore you might make mistakes. And I think that's one of the key issues why creativity and organizational structures, organizational processes have not always met. However, creativity in today's business world is, in my mind, something that companies will not do without. They will perish if they lack the creativity in the organization.
That's a good start, Antti. Thanks a lot for that need for creativity in the organization. So how about creativity? Let's start with an example. Creativity in creating Angry Birds, your own company. Can you tell us something about how do you manage to bring about creativity in your own organization?
Well, that's a good question. I think the Angry Birds is a story about creativity and perseverance. The company that was founded already over 10 years ago entered the sort of the arena of mobile gaming, which were technically and I would say also creatively extremely good games. And they published 51 games before the Angry Birds. Now, they were good games, excellent games, I would say, but they just didn't do what Angry Birds has done. Now, the perseverance factor comes from the fact that you are able to do 51 and you don't give up. Now, how you maintain that, I think creativity inherently is about perseverance as well. So you have to do, you have to try, you have to keep on trying, you have to keep on improving, you have to try to find new ways to do things. And for example, in the Angry Birds, I think that one of the creativity that, or helped the creativity of the game was the fact of the touch screens. And it allowed a new user interface, the slingshot. You know, it wasn't following the normal routes of controlling a game. We created a new way to approach, which was so appealing to people that I think it's one of the fundamental things. Now, that's a sign of a creativity, but it also needed the right time, the right technology, and there the perseverance comes into the game. So creativity, in my mind, is never just, you know, it's easy to see when something is success, and if it has a bit of a creativity behind it as well, people say, oh yeah, okay, well that was a great idea and it succeeded. Many times you don't see that you actually have had other creative ideas, but they just were not that successful, and you just had to keep on trying, keep on making it again and again and again, and whilst you're doing it, you learn from your mistakes, you improve, but you don't stop being creative.
Oh, that's wonderful, I think. So 50 times it was, you know, you failed and then finally you succeeded. So that's like the old saying, if you don't succeed the first time, try and try again. Very well fits over here. But moving into that, is creativity only restricted to technology or designers? Because in this case, it would be a lot of developers who would be creating the game, a lot of designers and creative people. We have a lot of, you know, our attendees would be a lot of people who are not just designers and developers. They would be of various profiles. Mm-hmm. So how do you actually bring creativity in your routine work? I'm sure that they would also want to know that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see creativity to be tied up to any particular discipline within a company, or even within your own life. I think you can, I would challenge that the participants, if any of you do your own, you know, shopping of your own groceries, there might be a more creative way of doing it than you do it today. So the creativity would be then targeted of putting some sort of an objective. Let's say that my objective is to make my shopping easier. Well, that's a good starting point applying creative thinking. Now, is that tied to a technology? It might be. Is it tied to something else? Yes, it might be just looking at the process, how you do these things today, find obsolete parts of the process, you remove them, you replace them. I think creativity is a natural force, a force of nature that you apply to anything that you do. And it's challenging. It's the curiosity of a kid. It's like, okay, I don't have any preconception of how this works, so I'm going to be open like a kid. I'm just going to look how it works. If it doesn't work the way I want, I'll try to improve it. So the creativity is something more aligned those than just tied to any particular discipline within a company or within your work. You can be very creative in a very controlled processes by just applying that creative thought there by saying and challenging. Creativity in many cases, in my mind, is also challenging. It's an ability to ask right questions. Why doesn't this work? And that's how creativity and innovation, which are sort of cousins or brothers and sisters, come together. You just challenge, you put the right question, you say, why is this done this way? Could there be another better way of doing this? It's a mindset.
Okay, that brings me to another interesting point, because you talked about creativity in everyday thing that you do, and you also talked about organizational processes. Now, organizations are all about processes. They have processes for everything, and they would like those to be followed. Now, creativity, in its essence, if you look at creativity, it's basically about breaking out of those processes and thinking of something new. So the two do not gel together. How do you actually bring about coexistence of both creativity and the processes in the organization?
That's a very good question, Anil. And if I have to be perfectly honest, if I would know the answer, I probably should apply a patent for it. Processes inherently try to remove the unexpected, right? So you want to make a process that follows certain rules and regulations, it's predictable, and it comes to an end result, what is hoped. Now, creativity in many cases could be seen as a very disruptive force. It could be seen as something that is not fitting into the process. I would say that I'm definitely not against processes. On the contrary, I think good companies need processes. But the way you can apply creativity is that I think companies should all the time have, I think they should have this need and want to challenge those processes whilst also adhering to the processes. So it's like saying, okay, we have so far the best process, but is it the best process it can be? I doubt that. I think there is even a better process which you might not have been discovered, so you can apply your creativity by challenging the processes, but it's not the same thing that you would not adhere to the processes. I think companies need to have certain processes in order to make them function. And if everybody is very creative by the rules, and by the way, don't apply the rules, you don't have a process, you have a chaos. And chaos is not the best path for a company to be in.
Okay. Yeah, that also reminds me of another example where long time ago there was this example of Linux, which is came into the country. And at that point of time, so what happened there was that Linux was a fresh operating system. Windows and others were dominant, and a lot of people were keen to use that operating system. And what happened there was that people tended to install Linux and put it in a box somewhere at the corner of an office, and nobody actually knew what was happening until somebody's mail went down, and all of a sudden there was chaos, that mail is not working. So they found out that all these months there was a Linux box that was handling all the email without their knowledge. So somebody actually sneaked the box in and started using that, and later on it became immensely popular. So I think that is another, a good example of how people can actually bring creativity. But there's the risk of, getting on the wrong side of different people in the organization, right? Especially your boss. He wouldn't want you to do things that he doesn't want to. So the question then follow on for that is, how do you actually bring people on your side, especially, in the organization, your boss and others? How do you actually bring them on your side if you want to be creative?
Okay, that's Linux is a good example. And I've had the privilege of meeting the creator himself, Linus Torvald. He came across to me like an artist of some sort, a very soft-spoken, very considerate man, but very focused on what he was doing. And I fully agree, in many companies where they tried the Linux system, they realized that, hey, there are so many easier ways to do it with this than that we used to be before. Where I think when you ask, well, how do you bring that about? And then another type of creativity which is needed when you're introducing something new into the company. That also requires quite a lot of creativity. Let's presume I have a boss who's always wants things to be done that they've done before. Now, it's a creative approach of finding that angle that your boss or the organization would require in order to take something new on board. And that's a creative approach as well. It's creativity in selling your ideas. It's a creativity of understanding what makes the organization tick. Why would they try to do this? Now, if you just think it's just some new technology that's completely unproven and you want to put everything we have into that, it creates mistrust. So you would need to find creative solutions of selling your ideas. And selling ideas is one big part of being creative. It's not just enough to find something that is, that is right. But if you can't make anybody else believe in that, it's fairly obsolete to come up with something. So you might need somebody else to help you to sell the idea, or you might have a team together. You come up with an idea, and then you get some other people on board and say, okay, how do we make this happen? And that's another level of creativity, which you apply to sort of internal sales, if I may say it that way.
Okay. Now, in the organization, it could probably be easier said than done, because if you look at some of the things that are there, for example, there's an organizations of IPR, right? So therefore, they don't want to lose their IPR. So there could be issues related to that they fear that by people being more creative, they might actually end up losing some of their IPR. Security issues, for instance. That is some of, one issue that is they are constrained. And, there are these stringent policies. HR. Okay, they're very worried about all these things. So how do you actually balance that out between creativity, between the individual and the security and IPR issues and policies of an organization?
All right. The security and creativity are also a bit of a opposite ends of the spectrum word, and I think in that respect, it's fair to say that especially in today's world, the security has been put in this sort of forefront of many companies, and I would sign to that. However, creativity, anybody wants to be creative, don't expect to be thanked. Expect to be battered. I mean, you bring something, you normally bring bad news because you bring in change. Just think about the film companies of Kodaks of the world. I'm sure, I've not been in a company, I'm sure that some people would say, at that point when they have tens of thousands of people, and they say, well, I don't think this industry will be there in 10 or 15 years' time. Now, that's not an idea that the management board would like to hear. However, these are just examples. You have tens of other companies that have been made obsolete by creativity or innovation and creativity in some other field, and it gets imported into the field where you are, and it just suddenly makes you completely obsolete. And I think, if you look at it from that point of view, any process, anything, even security can apply creativity in there. But then you have to understand what. So it brings to me and one very important thing people tend to forget when they talk about creativity. Creativity is not something that you apply to the universe. It has to have an objective. It brings my mind this wonderful saying of Mr. David Ogilvy, the great ad guy for years and years ago. He said, give me the freedom of a very tight brief. And what he meant by that is saying, you have to be very clear on what you want to achieve, and then it's your turn to apply creativity to that. So, let's say that you want to make your emails more secure, and then you be more specific in mobile devices, and even more specific, and that becomes a brief. That becomes like the organizational goal, and that's a process which then after that you need creativity to come up with solutions. Creativity can be applied in many ways. It can be applied to how we monitor everything that is out there in the world today. Do we need to compile something new? Do we need to combine something new? So I think we start creativity normally in the wrong place. We think it's just something that you sit back, you think nice thoughts, and then something great comes into your head. It doesn't go that way in my mind. It comes from that tight brief. What does this company need? And it can be a small thing or a bigger thing depending on what part of the organization you work, but it needs to have that objective. And then you apply creativity. Now, we spoke in the beginning of this, we spoke about creativity needs that environment. Obviously, you will not put any creativity in there if you get slapped on your fingers every time you come up with something new or every time you make a mistake. That's an environment that repels creativity. And that sort of organizations we've seen going through that loop of not being creative, not being able to renew themselves, and finally they become obsolete. They're like the dinosaurs of the world.
That's an interesting observation, and I think very relevant that the quote that you said, that give me a very tight brief. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you cannot just wander around aimlessly and say I'm going to be creative, but don't know really where to start. Mm. That's very important, I think. But I think another important aspect of being creative is that how do you actually sustain it? Because sustainability is extremely important. You can't be something where you just, be creative once and it becomes successful, but after that, nothing. So I think it's also equally important to sustain it, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, you keep bringing out newer versions of Angry Bird, and every time it's a really different type of a game, which is very immersive, right? How do you actually bring about creativity, and how do you sustain it in an organization?
Yeah, I think it still starts from the environment of that organization, but it then boils down to every individual. Now, let's think about ourselves as we all are born, as kids, we're born creative. As we do not know that many things, we have to be creative of finding them out. So we're curious, we want to see how things work, and we don't have ready answers for most of the things. Then we grow up, and it starts to be like a little sort of, we have, this is an answer to this question, A7 or B11, or we've seen this before, oh, that's clearly C12. So we don't apply that much thinking, we're just repeating what we've seen before. And it's like a counter force to our creativity. We go to from let's think this from a fresh table going to, oh yeah, I know the answer, it's C12. Kids don't have it. They don't have this ready answers to multiple questions. So my challenge to anybody listening to this is that, that people sometimes say you can't teach creativity. I disagree. I think, on the contrary, you can teach creativity very easily. The key word is unlearning. It's unlearning the truths that you think that are there and challenging them. So it's like not being lazy and say, okay, I know exactly how to fix this problem. And you fix it, and it's done before you even thought about, is there a better way of doing it? So that's when you can't have that layer of creativity. But if you can unlearn that minute of, oh yeah, I know the answer, and you just have, I might know the answer, but I still make a little effort of thinking that if perhaps there is something else that I should consider. And this takes a lot of effort, but it can be, and everybody can be creative. Everybody is creative. It's just a question how we apply it.
So again, that's a very good observation, and the fact that you need to have a kid in you who is not really, who is new to the world and who is exploring. Okay, the organization may not really allow that to happen, right? So, but what I'm trying to say is that there, at an individual level, if I were to look at it, so you give the example of maybe a kid, a child who is just growing up and learning a lot of things. What about people who are in the routine jobs, which it's very difficult to identify what kind of a creativity can you really add to it. How can you actually be creative in a really, really routine job? I think a lot of people would be having that kind of a job, maybe, say a call center or somebody who's just doing, maybe a developer who's just continuously doing coding of the same thing again and again. There's a lot of such routine jobs which people end up doing. How can you be creative in those? It would be nice to hear some insights on that.
Okay, well, it depends first what you want to have, what you want to get from the creativity. I mean, let's take a call center job, and you have a ready-made script to every single, or nearly every single question that you come through. Nobody expects you to be creative in that sense. They expect you to say it in a clear and easy to understand manner, follow the script, and that. Now, yet still, you'll find that there are big differences between different people in the same job. Now, it's not necessarily only because of the creativity. There might be other interpersonal skills that person might have. So I, again, would not go and jump to saying, okay, you have to be more creative if there is no place for that creativity. However, the creativity might be in the fact that you say, once you've done that about 1,500 times, you say, well, you say to your call center boss or whoever, say, I've noticed a certain pattern here. I've noticed that every time I do this, this happens. And I've noticed that if I do that, that happens. Now, that makes the call this much longer. If we might have something like this, it could work better. So again, it's just improving that process that you think that is already there. But if you accept that you have the best process in the world and it cannot be improved, and then I don't think there's any place for creativity. There are some organizations that think that they figured it out all. And they think that way until the moment that that's not true. Somebody else comes with a better solution. Somebody else applies a bit more creativity in the same area what you are doing. As an individual, it's up to you whether you want to apply creativity or not, whether you want to see your work as a field to apply creativity or not, or you just say, oh, I can't apply anything to this, I just have to go on and doing exactly the same I've done every day. I would not have any remedy for that. That's something that you have to fix from first your head and then go forward from there if you want to be creative. But creativity is a fantastic force in the world, but very much undervalued in the corporate world as well, because it's seen uncontrollable.
I think that's a very valid point, that creativity would be undervalued in the corporate world. And one possible example of that would be where an employee is being very creative, and that is seen as, by the supervisors or the managers as possibly a threat to them, if I were to use that word, that, my employee is more creative than me and he's applying more creative thought in his work, so he might do better than me. And I think there's some sort of fear also amongst managers also not to really encourage that kind of a thing.
Well, true. That's very true. Now, I could take another, not just a manager, let's take a very hard profession. Let's take teachers. Now, in the old days, you were the absolute authority. You would say, when was our independence? How many states would we have? Who was saying what and to when and whom? That was it. That was pretty much unchallengeable. Now, today's, in the Googling world, that's no longer that. And somebody comes to raises their hand as a teacher. No, that wasn't the case. You have your facts wrong. Now, that's a big challenge. Now, what's the teacher to do? Saying, you end in an argument, or you're trying to encourage kids to come back. You have to be creative about your own work and saying, what is the purpose of my work? Is it for me to be right or get my pupils to learn more? And, if it's to learn more, then you apply creativity the way you teach and process and give things. And I think, again, there's a lot of room for creativity. So in that sort of a situation. So, again, creativity, needs a purpose, needs a goal, and you need to apply. It's a certain way of looking at things. Never be happy. I mean, creative people are never happy. Because you always want to find something new. Because the world is never ready. And no process is ready. No company is ready. Nothing is ready. If you think that you know how your job, rethink. I don't think anybody knows their job. And sometimes you are lifting the podium and celebrated. Sometimes you put down based on the results. But we very rarely think about this in the form that, hey, I can always improve. I can always be more creative. I can always apply creativity in anything I do. And that makes life that much more interesting.
That's interesting thought. Now, what do you think should the role of, say, an HR department in an organization be? Because I think HR has a key role to play. Creativity is all about, individuals and how they can actually perform better, how they can actually think better, and, how they can do their jobs better, right? How can HR, according to you, in an organization actually encourage this kind of a thought process without impacting the productivity of employees negatively? Because creativity also has the risk of wandering off into different things, and you don't end up doing what you're supposed to. That is also something the organization doesn't like.
Yeah, that's a very good one, Anil. The HR is it's also in a very much in a changing environment, because the new employees of the day are completely different than the generation before. They might be less process-driven. They might be more individualistic. They want to be, they want to be treated in a different way. They want to be treated more individually. And HR has a big challenge in here, because, especially in the bigger companies, it's a question of processes again. These are our sort of salary remunerations. These are our bonus systems. This is this. This is that. And you want to keep everybody treated in a fair manner. I used to have an old boss in the old times. He said, if they would use that amount of creativity that they put just to justify their car benefits and their housing benefits and all the rest of the benefits, if they use only a fraction of that creativity for the company, we would be doing so much better. There's a truth in that. So it's easy. It's easy for us to put creativity in the things that are closer to our hand. So let's say that there's an HR saying, oh, here's the new process. Normally people don't like it when it's to them, unless it feels very secure. So, there are these two sides of the HR, depending on what type of person you are. If you're very individualistic, if you're very not want to be like everybody else, the approach that the modern HR has is not feeling good. But if you are somebody who is comfort-driven and you want security, then the standard HR process is actually beneficial for you. But obviously, the HR in today's world is one of the most challenging environments when it comes to creativity, because people don't want to be treated the same.
That's true, and in fact, I've got a poll sitting in front of me where we've asked people a question about, I think, who is the biggest obstacle as far as creativity is concerned, and I think besides the fact that 77% people have not responded, but whoever has responded, maximum people say myself. Basically means people are seeing themselves as the inhibitors to their own creativity.
Well, that's very interesting. It's also very interesting that it's so much highlighted. I commend everybody who said that. I think that's true. It's easiest to start improving the creativity when you start from yourself. And I think it's the key learn there is this unlearning of the habits, unlearning of your thought patterns. Just break them every now and then. You don't have to do it every day. You don't every day have to think about, oh, let's find a creative way to get myself into the work. No, but every now and then you could challenge, whether that way you are taking yourself to work or any other mundane things, whether in work or in your private life, that could be challenged. Do I actually ever think about these things, or am I just following out some routine that I've come up with 10 years ago?
Another interesting observation from the same poll, and maybe we could just have a discussion on that, is that the second highest response is on the boss. That means 6% people feel that the greatest obstacle to creativity is their boss. And interestingly, nobody is opted for the CEO or the CFO option. That they don't feel that they are the obstacles to creativity. Maybe they are too distant from their CEO or CFO to be able to comment on that, which possibly is another area of that possibly organizations should be looking into. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the boss, yeah, it might be that, and I think there are a few ways to go about that. I mean, depending on what you choose to do. If you're very creative and your boss doesn't allow that, you can obviously try to sell your ideas to your boss. If that doesn't happen, you can try to change your boss, but I would not recommend that. Normally it doesn't work out. So you have that option. You either stay and you fight, or you change and you find somewhere else. Which I think is a good choice to stay and fight, is then I think any reasonable boss will listen to good questions. I find that sometimes people are, when they're selling their ideas, they're selling the solutions when they should sell the question. You want the other person to think about, hey, what would happen if people would not use film in 20 years' time? Should be the question in Kodak, not, oh, people will use digital cameras and there will be no film. That's a threat. So again, you want to sell them as a questions rather than as ready answers, because if you can sell a good question, then the answer becomes the solution and not a threat.
I think that's a very relevant point about being able to sell to your boss and selling the question rather than your answer to the boss. And I think you've given a very good example of Kodak on that, and there are many other such obviously good examples that one can look at where people just kind of completely shun inventions, and later on those are the very inventions that completely revolutionize the entire world. And there are plenty of examples of that, the telephone and so many other technologies are there. So very relevant. But on the boss side, my implication there was that possibly there is a need of better communication where the boss can also be more approachable by the employees. Not necessarily the manager, I'm talking about the overall CEO or CFO, should also be approachable by employees for sharing of ideas. I think that could also nurture a lot of creativity. What is your thought on that?
Absolutely. Everything starts from the entire environment, and of course the bosses are one of the key contributors to that. Again, we all change, and the environment changes, and we change with the environment. So I think the boss angle here, and any boss here that is listening to this webinar, also do a little self probing into yourself and say, do I actually allow creativity? And what would that mean? What does it mean to allow creativity? It means that you give people entitlement to question things. That's what it means. That you don't, and if they come up with a solution, you're ready, if it's anywhere reasonable, to try it out. Try fast, fail fast. as a sort of a modern way of doing things. And I like a sort of, you look at the new technology things, you look at the Silicon Valley way of working things, really, that's trial and error, which then finds out, there's a lot of creativity put into a lot of services, out of which 99% will fail, or even more. But that's no reason not to apply creativity into that. It's just that, you try fast, you fail fast. And then you try again, and then try again, and then you try again. So you just push that creativity. So the bosses have to think about that as well. Do I actually allow my organization to be creative? Do I encourage that? Do I say, oh, that was great. You just came up with an idea that I have been doing wrong for the past 3 years. I mean, it takes a big boss to admit that.
Okay, I think that's a good answer. And I think we are also now ready to get questions. I've been getting a lot of questions from some of the attendees and some interesting ones. So I'm going to ask you the first question. It is from Judith. She has asked, can creativity only be nurtured, or can it also be learned or taught?
Both, actually, yes. Nurtured always needed. Taught also, it is I don't really see any management courses nowadays out there would say, hey, how to become a creative boss. You can become a better communicator, better this, better that, but creativity is not linked to the management science as much as it should be. So it's still down to an individual to nurture that creativity and to improve that. One exercise is that unlearning. Take something that you do every day, anything. It can be just something that you do every day, and think, how could I look at this from a different angle? But you have to put some sort of a goal for it. So, as I said, it can be something very easy of how am I getting to work every day? Or something like that. And then apply creativity to that. And just feel how it feels. Okay, fine, so I'm taking the metro every day. I'm doing this, I'm walking there. Is there any other way I can do it? Might be that there is not. But at least that process teaches the way to look at things that look very mundane, and you do them automatically without even thinking. But thinking and creativity can be just a few seconds. And it's a very quick process sometimes. And say, okay, hey, this could be an idea. Then you try it. If it doesn't work, you don't repeat that mistake. You say, okay, fine, I tried. That didn't work. Now you could do the next day, and the next day. Might be that you find something different. But as an exercise and an excellent way of looking at it. Creativity is not a medicine to everything. But it needs perseverance, as we said in the beginning of this webinar. Perseverance and new thoughts. That's creativity.
Okay, so that was about how people can nurture creativity. I have another question, which is a more practical one. So Asim Sood wants to know, can you share some specific initiatives that a company has taken to encourage creativity in their organization? Some examples.
That's a good. I don't think I have a very sort of ready example on how companies have, and I would love to have anybody to share if they have after the session or within the session what sort of thing. I don't see that creativity has matured to the level where companies would really make, okay, let's become more creative. There are obviously companies that have very creative founders or CEOs, which radiate that. And then, of course, when the management is changed, the atmosphere can change. And we've seen a lot of companies that have been built to sort of a creativity, I would say, of one individual. And sometimes they struggle to continue that. But if it's really well embedded in the organization can carry that same ethos. And it can take that same ethos forward, that creativity, creativity is just a word for something that allows people to apply their thinking and be different and try to find better ways to do things. And in an organization, you have millions of points of doing that. The only thing I don't believe in is in having a little box, which you call an ideas box. That I don't believe in.
A follow-on question to the same thing was, so people want to know any specific thing about the difference at Rovio, as in, what is it that is helping nurture creativity at Rovio?
I think it is in the company is always challenging, always improving, and only releasing something when it's really 100% there. So the creativity is applied in many parts of the process when you come up with something new. For us in Rovio, it's what we call a fanverse. It's a group of our fans. You know, the 2 billion downloads of the Angry Birds game has created immense audience, and our first and foremost obligation towards that audience is to delight them. Now, in order to delight, you have to apply creativity. You have to think about. You have to come up with, okay, let's get some free new levels. Let's do this. Let's do that. It's a continuous process, and everybody is encouraged to do that. One big thing about creativity is also a very good sharing of information, sharing of ideas, and giving people an opportunity to participate. So we have a lot of those type of discussions. I say, hey, we have had this idea. Who would be wanting to join in? I'll organize a little Skype session, and we all can. I'd like to hear your views. And this type of thing, which is very informal, but very efficient as well, is just feeding in to that. And I would also say that we also exercise what I would call positive criticism. So not all ideas are good ideas, but if you have a criticism towards an idea, you should then come up with something which makes it better.
I think that's good, because there's a need for conveying criticism, also to give back positive feedback. I think when you talk about so many downloads, that itself kind of puts in a lot of motivation for the team to do more and do better and better. So besides giving criticism, I think it's also important to share the successes of the company with the employees.
And I could say also that we have had and actually been implemented in a game. I think our youngest contributor was a boy from the United States. He's 7-year-old. We send an absolutely fantastic ideas which have been incorporated into the game. So who says who can contribute, who can be creative? But it takes a creative organization to accept that sort of proposal from somebody that young.
So the next question I have is from Amitava Sen, and he wants to know how many companies acknowledge the need for creativity or provide the opportunity to creative people.
To my experience, and now I'm talking about my experience when working with other organizations, very few. And I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I would say that in many cases, the board meetings are the least creative meetings I've ever attended in any company. Now, there are many reasons for that. Creativity sometimes doesn't come across as credible. It doesn't look serious enough. Creative people, they are some sort of weirdos. They're not serious business people. Serious business people use ties, and they look always very worried. Yeah, that could be the case, but again, in a company, most of the companies don't want to be seen creative unless they operate in a creative industry. That used to be the case. Now everything is changing. You can just think about how many industries being changed by, well, let's take like a publishing industry. Entirely goes to your industry. How much it's changed during the last years. Now, this type of rapid change that this technology and infrastructure are bringing into the table, they make also the board behavior to change. And I would say that it's not very far away where we're going to see more boards that actually embrace creativity as well, because they see that there's no survival without that. Obviously, there are areas where you probably won't want to do that creativity. You know, you have to have the company processes, the financial things, everything. They need to be very, very well organized. But all the other areas of the company can embrace creativity, also in the board level.
I think you're very right that a lot of companies who are actually creative are probably the ones who encourage creativity, those who are into that kind of an area only, whereas most of the other companies end up trying to discourage creativity, and that's, I think, what is the biggest challenge that people need to handle. I have one more question. In business reviews at Rovio, do you review progress on creativity aspects as well, and how do you measure that? I think that's relevant.
It's very relevant. I mean, the measuring creativity is extremely difficult, as is the remuneration. I mean, also the positive encouragement. So, it's not just the pat on the shoulder. There are many ways to encourage people to creativity and to remuneration. One is a public acknowledgement. We should never underestimate that. Good ideas, whose idea it was, and give credit to the right people. It's very important, and it encourages a lot of that. Also, when you find people that have had good ideas, we've tried them and they didn't work, if you encourage that still, that's also a very good way of doing it. So I think that's one thing. Merely monetary things, I'm not quite sure. I've seen companies, myself, I think I have probably over 20 international patents in different parts of the infrastructure world, the mobile advertising mostly. And I've seen a lot of companies in the mobile industry, they have had, they give a few $100 of sort of incentives so people come up with ideas which could be patented and so on and so forth. I don't think that's the one we should going to create. You should have something else that makes people come up with good ideas. Hey, this could be something for our company. And if you look at that from the creativity point of view, in today's world, more and more companies will need to have more and more solid portfolio of IP when it comes to the patents and any intellectual property. And that, you need the entire organization to create that. So it can't be just one guy who's doing that. You need the whole organization come up with new ideas. Oh, this could be good. We're not doing that, but that could be something that's linked to our manufacturing process, that's linked to something of that. We should go and we should make a patent application out of that. A good way of encouraging also is then to make that acknowledgement rather than just a small token. I'm not saying that the money is not a good incentive, I'm just saying it's not the only one.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that it's not just monetary gain that people are looking after, they also look at words of encouragement, acknowledgement. Absolutely right. So people are now asking another question, that are companies not prepared to go off the beaten track, that is as defined by the management gurus, and to pursue creativity? That means, taking unknown risks. Are companies not really prepared to go off the beaten track?
Yeah. I mean, the more sort of predictable your industry is, obviously less prone you are to go out of and venture to something new, which is biggest risk for some companies, because you might not be replaced by a player on the same field. You might be replaced by a completely new enterprise. Now, I'm looking at the sort of the social messaging, for example, as the one. You would think that Facebook is so natural that they would dominate that. Not the case. Why are we seeing other companies then? I mean, Facebook is there and it will be. It's a big force to be reckoned. But why are these other companies actually taking the dominant driving seat in that social messaging space and social mobile messaging? And there's this good saying that it's very rare that a dominant player in one field can then, when it moves to the next field, can actually continue doing that. I mean, the Nokia is a very good example of when the industry changed from mobile phones to mobile computers, I would call. And there are new players now coming into that field. The same goes with social networks. When they were just social networks in mobile still continues, but when you put the messaging on top of that, sometimes it's new companies. Perhaps these new companies have a bit more fresher look at that, perhaps a bit more creative look at that. They don't have that much to lose. They don't have the old baggage. I don't know. Some of these things just improve that creativity. So very careful. I would be very careful in very established industries. I don't think that there are that many established industries in the world that will remain the same the years to come. Every industry is now changing rapidly.
No, I think you're absolutely right, because if you look at some of the examples like Nokia itself, or who would have ever thought that a company like Apple would actually get into the phone business from a PC business, and they got into the music business from the PC business. So there was a lot of tangents that they actually got into and got into other industries. So I think it's also a question of taking risk and having the appetite for risk. That is important.
Yeah, it would be actually very interesting. Apple, I don't think they've ever been in the IT industry at all. And I think the minute that they thought they were in IT industry and they were competing with PCs, 15 years ago, they didn't do that well. This was only when they realized that, no, we're actually in a lifestyle industry. We're in a lifestyle industry of helping people to do things better in their life when it has something digital to do that. Then they started to flourish. Then the music came naturally, the movies came naturally, the phones came naturally, those things came naturally when you sort of took yourself out of the thinking pattern that I'm an IT company.
So I guess the first lesson there is that you have to come out of your thinking pattern and think of your company as something totally different in order to be able to move into new domains.
Yeah. And I think, you have many of these. You start a company with a certain idea, and then you end up being something else. I mean, the Google probably the guys in the Google, when they founded it first time, they probably just wanted to make the fastest and the best search engine, right? With the best algorithm. Well, they didn't think that they enter into media business, right? But they are the biggest media company in the world. So again, you come up with something and then transfer it to something completely different.
There's one more question from Sukesh Tyagi, and he's saying that will organizing seminars be helpful in achieving our goal? That means how can we achieve that? I think they would like to have their own internal seminars. They want to know whether that will help them in bringing about creativity.
Absolutely. If the program is done so that it encourages it, I think any interactions that happen and we discuss about these things would be good. I mean, I'm all for brainstorming, but not in a traditional way. I mean, I have to say that I don't like the sessions where everybody can throw in ideas and nobody is being, how stupid the idea might be, because there are stupid ideas. But if you apply in a brainstorming session a bit more criticism in a positive way, I think that's the way to do it. And so these are the modern companies nowadays. So you have a room full of people. You throw in your idea. Okay, somebody says, "Oh, I don't know, sure that," but there's something in that. But if perhaps we could do this and that. So that's sort of brainstorming sessions where you throw in ideas. You're not afraid to be, you're not judged by that. I'm not talking about negative criticism, right? You're not judged. It's positive criticism. So yeah, that's okay, but I don't think it's good in this respect. However, there's something in that idea, and then the whole organization takes it forward. All creativity in nowadays organizations is a collaborative work process.
I would like to just add to that and to also answer the question a little further on the brainstorming aspect that we talked about. I think the whole objective of doing a brainstorming session is that you do not question or doubt anybody's idea. It could be a stupid idea, it could be a brilliant idea, but you do not question that in a brainstorming session. I think you just ask people to say whatever ideas they can think of, and you just put them down in a meeting. Let it be open. Do not hold anybody. Do not kind of make fun of any idea. Just list them down, and it's the evaluation of the idea comes later. After that, the ideas can actually be evaluated and thought through. So I think brainstorming is required in an organization, but in a very organized manner.
It's a developing area. That's a very interesting point of view, and I mean we could have a completely different session about the brainstorming because it is a process of finding collective intelligence and bringing it together. Fully agree. There's a lot into that in the brainstorming sessions.
There's a last question because I think we are about to run out of time. This is from Shraddha Mishra, and it's saying ideas take ages to convert into reality. How do I fast forward those ideas?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good one. I'm sure that Bull has seen brilliant ideas, which we never heard of, because they failed to execute them. And again, I would say I would probably bring it back to that question thing. So you think you have the greatest idea of the entire world for something. If you can formulate that to become a question where your idea then brings the answer, I think it will fast forward it. But if you're just trying to push the solution without asking the right question, people don't see the necessity of that. But the minute that the organization, a group of people see the necessity of that new idea, it will have wings. It will fly. But if you're just trying to push, this is the best way of doing webinars. No. You might ask a question about the webinars first so that people understand, okay, is there any room for improvement? And then you have your solution. I think that's the way to do it. Always try to pitch your good idea as a question to what it brings an answer rather than an answer without that question.
I think that's a really good response to that question, and I think we have reached the end of our webinar. And if all the audience liked our webinar, do give us your feedback and suggestions on how to improve. I'd like to thank you, Antti, for taking your time and to be here with us for this discussion. Thank you, audience. Thank you for coming in on time and staying with us throughout the time. And if you do have any questions, let us know. I appreciate that you have been here and sat through and listened to us. I hope you found it useful. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of the first Lead for Change webinar by PCQuest and CIOL.com in association with the Outstanding Speakers Bureau, SAP, and powered by Arkadin. Hope you found the session insightful. Look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. So thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect. Thank you so much.